I'm sitting in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, and I can taste the bitter cold of 4 a.m. in the back of my throat. There's a letter on the table in front of me. Not a real letter, printed from my laptop, pages stapled together with a small metal clip. My hands are completely steady as I read it one more time. No tremor, no hesitation. I've read it 43 times now. I know every word by heart. The letter details 7 years of financial fraud. 7 years of my trust account being systematically drained. 7 years of my brother signing my name on documents. 7 years of my parents watching it happen and saying nothing. And I'm about to send it everywhere. But you need to understand how I got here, because this isn't a story about a girl who snapped. This is a story about a girl who woke up, and trust me, that's so much worse for the people who hurt her. Part 1, the moment everything exploded. It was a Wednesday night in March. I remember because it was the night I'd scheduled to finally tell them about my job offer. Senior designer at Brennan and Associates. $48,000 a year. Benefits. The first real victory of my adult life, and I was going to share it with the 3 people I thought loved me most. My brother Marcus came home around 6. He smelled like beer and cologne, the way he always does when he's been out with his friends. He didn't hug me like he usually does, just nodded at me from the doorway and walked upstairs. My parents were already in the living room when I got there. Dad was reading something on his phone. Mom was folding laundry that had been sitting in the basket for 3 days. The television was on some news channel. Nobody was really watching it. I sat down on the edge of the couch. "I got the job," I said. My mom smiled. It was the kind of smile you give a stranger on the street. Polite, brief. "That's nice, honey." My dad just nodded without looking up. And I felt something, a small cold thing that touched the back of my neck, but I pushed past it. "It's actually really good," I continued. "Better benefits than I expected. Start date is April 15th. They want me to." "Sarah," it was Marcus. He was standing at the top of the stairs, still wearing his jacket. "Can I talk to you?" I remember being annoyed at the interruption. I wanted to finish telling them about the job. I wanted them to ask questions. I wanted them to be proud. I went upstairs with him. His room was dark. The curtains were closed even though it was still light outside. He turned to face me, and for the first time I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before. He looked angry, but under the anger was something else, something like fear. "You need to come down and talk to Mom and Dad right now," he said. "About what? I'm in the middle of." "I'm serious, now." My stomach dropped. It was the tone, the certainty in his voice, the way his jaw was clenched. We went back downstairs together. My parents were standing now. They weren't looking at me. My mom was looking at her hands. My dad was staring at the television, even though the news story had changed 3 times since I'd left the room. "Sit down," Marcus said. I didn't sit. "What's happening?" I asked. "The bank called today," my dad said quietly, "about your investment account." I felt like the room had tilted sideways. I'd opened that account when I was 21, a trust fund from my grandmother, $50,000 that was supposed to be my safety net. I hadn't touched it in years. I was saving it for something, a house, a business. I wasn't sure yet, but I knew it was there. "What about it?" I heard myself ask. "The balance is below 5,000, my dad said. The words didn't make sense. They were English words, but they came out in an order that had no meaning. "What?" I whispered. $45,000 has been withdrawn over the past 7 years, my mom said. They wanted to confirm some of the transactions before they called you. I looked at Marcus. He was standing very still, his hands in his pockets. "Where did it go?" I asked. Nobody answered. "Where did it go?" "Marcus had some financial difficulties," my dad began. And then I understood. The sound that came out of me wasn't really a sound. It was more like a rupture. 7 years. Every time I thought I was being prudent about money, choosing the practical apartment or the used car, my brother was on a European vacation. Every time I took the bus instead of an Uber, he was buying another designer bag for his girlfriend. You knew, I looked at my parents. You both knew. Sarah, you don't understand, my mom said. He was in a very difficult situation. The credit card companies were. You knew, I said again, not a question this time. We were trying to help him, sweetheart, my dad said. And we thought that by the time you needed the money, he would have paid it back. He promised us he would. Marcus looked at the floor. The betrayal was so massive that I couldn't feel it all at once. It came in waves. The shock first. Then the arithmetic of it, stolen from me to help him. Then the loneliness of realizing that the three people who were supposed to protect me had instead chosen to protect each other. And they hadn't even told him to ask my permission. They'd just done it, quietly, without saying anything. I want it back, I said. Of course we'll, my dad started. Now, I want it back now. Sarah, Marcus is in a better place financially. It will take some time for him to gather. I left. I walked upstairs to my room and locked the door. I didn't cry. The betrayal was too large for tears. It existed in a space beyond emotion. It was a fact, a geography. The ground had shifted and I was trying to figure out which direction was up. My phone buzzed around midnight. A text from my mom. We love you. Please know this has nothing to do with how much you matter to us. I didn't respond. Another text from my dad an hour later. We made a mistake. Let's talk about it tomorrow. I turned my phone off. At 2 a.m, I heard them outside my door. Both of them. My mom was crying quietly. My dad was saying something about how they'd been trying to protect the family, how Marcus was in a dark place, how they were so sorry. And I realized then that the apology had nothing to do with me. It was about them. They were trying to repair how they felt about themselves. They wanted me to absolve them so they could sleep better. I didn't open the door. Part 2, the architecture of normal. But before I can tell you how I got my revenge, I need to tell you who I was before this happened. Because revenge is a dish best served by someone who understands the precise temperature it needs to be consumed at. And I needed to be very, very cold. I've always been the careful one. Growing up, while Marcus was the charming one, the one who made people laugh at dinner, the one who people naturally gravitated toward, I was the quiet one. Not shy. I just observed. I watched how conversations worked. I noticed patterns. I understood cause and effect. By the time I was 10, I could predict what my parents would do in almost any situation. It sounds strange, but it wasn't a superpower. It was simple mathematics. I had 3 variables, their moods, their beliefs, their history, and once I had enough data points, the outcomes became predictable. My brother was brilliant. Everyone said so. But his brilliance was the kind that broke things. He'd walk into a room and immediately know the best jokes to tell, the way to make people feel special in his presence. He had charisma. By 19, he had friends from 5 different friend groups. By 22, he had a girlfriend who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. By 25, he had credit card debt of $90,000. Nobody wanted to talk about that last part, not even him. My parents, I loved them. That was the truth that made everything else harder. They were good people. They volunteered at the community center. They were kind to my friends. They remembered my birthday every year and gave thoughtful gifts. But they were also weak in specific ways that only people who are close to someone can see. They couldn't say no to my brother. And they couldn't sit with disappointment. They'd do almost anything to avoid the uncomfortable feeling of their child being in pain, which meant they'd do things that caused their other child pain instead. I knew this about them the way you know the layout of your childhood home. It was furniture in my brain. So when the theft happened, I wasn't surprised. Not really. Shocked, yes. Betrayed, absolutely, but not surprised. The job offer that I'd planned to celebrate that night, I'd never told them I didn't start it. I called them the next day and told them I'd decided to turn it down. Some conflict with my schedule. It wasn't a lie, exactly. The conflict was real. It was the conflict happening in my chest. Instead, I took a job at a design firm that paid less but gave me something more important: time. I needed to think. I needed to plan. I needed to become someone other than the girl whose family had stolen from her. I moved into an apartment with 2 roommates. I told my parents I needed space. They understood because understanding didn't cost them anything. Space was free. But I wasn't getting space. I was getting distance, and distance gave me perspective. The first thing I did was call the bank and request a detailed statement of every transaction on the account, all 7 years of them. The bank was hesitant. I wasn't named on the account anymore in any official capacity, but when I explained the situation, they connected me with a fraud investigator. His name was Tom. He had a sympathetic voice. "Has a police report been filed?" he asked me. "No," I said. "My parents won't press charges against my brother." "What about you?" I hadn't thought about that yet. The question sat in the space between us. "I don't know," I said. "Well, if you decide to, here's what you'll need." He sent me a list: documentation, a written statement, evidence that you didn't authorize the transactions, proof of identity theft if that's what occurred. I started a folder on my computer. I labeled it documentation. Over the next 3 weeks, I compiled every piece of evidence: bank statements, the fraudulent signature from a wire transfer form where my brother had forged my name, emails between my parents about the stolen money, screenshots of my brother's Instagram posts from vacations, jewelry, restaurants, all of it funded by my trust fund. I didn't feel angry while I did this. I felt focused, clean, like I was finally doing the work I was supposed to be doing. My mom called the second week of April. I answered because I was supposed to act like a person who was processing betrayal, not a person who was actively prosecuting it. "How are you, honey?" she asked. "I'm okay," I said, "just busy with work." "Marcus is in therapy now." I made a small, sympathetic noise. "The therapist says that his spending was a way of managing his anxiety," she continued. "He was self-medicating through acquisition." I almost laughed, because what she was describing was a person who had a problem, and instead of addressing that problem, my parents had solved it by creating a problem for me. "That's good," I said. "I'm glad he's getting help." "We want to make this right," she said. "Your father and I have been talking, and we'd like to pay you back. We're going to set up a payment plan. $200 a month for 18 years, I finished for her. "Sarah, we're doing our best." $200 a month for 18 years means you think this is acceptable, I said. You think you can steal $45,000 from your daughter and fix it with 18 years of $200 installments. "We didn't steal from you," she said quietly. "It was Marcus." "He didn't steal from me. You did. You knew. You let him. You didn't tell me. You protected him. That was your choice." She didn't say anything. "I have to go," I said, and I hung up the phone. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was upset, but because I was planning. I lay in the dark and thought about what revenge actually meant, what it needed to look like. Not screaming, not anger, not even the satisfaction of being right. Real revenge was the other person understanding, bone deep, that they had made a terrible mistake. That they would spend years, maybe the rest of their lives, wishing they could undo what they'd done to you. I couldn't give that to Marcus. He had no capacity for that kind of understanding. He'd never developed it. That wasn't his fault exactly, but it also wasn't my responsibility to save him from the consequences of that. But my parents could understand. My parents could feel the weight of what they'd done. And I was going to make sure they did. Part 3, the machinery of betrayal. Let me tell you about the moments before it all becomes clear. It's not usually one moment, it's a series of them. They're like stepping stones. One stone is weird. 2 stones might be coincidence. But when you see the full path, you understand where it was always leading. I started spending more time at my parents' house. This was strategic. You can't become invisible to people while actively avoiding them, so I showed up. I helped my mom with yard work. I had dinner with my dad on Thursdays. I created the appearance of normalcy while doing the actual work of building a case. My brother avoided me. I let him. Here's the thing about people who have wronged you. They expect you to stay angry. It makes them feel safer in a twisted way. Anger is something they can bargain with. It's something they can try to soothe or fight against. But quiet is terrifying to them because they can't see what's happening underneath it. In May, my parents asked me to come to a family dinner. Marcus would be there. I said yes immediately. I wore a blue dress. Not too nice, not too casual. I wore earrings my grandmother gave me, the ones that make me look trustworthy. I did my makeup carefully so that it looked like I wasn't trying. I was performing normalcy, and I was very good at it. Marcus arrived at 6:30. He brought wine. He was trying. I could see him measuring my reaction to him, trying to figure out if I'd forgiven him. I smiled. It was a real smile, which made it more effective. "Hey," he said, and he hugged me. I hugged him back. Dinner was salmon. My mom made it the way I like it. She was trying too. Everyone was trying except for me. I wasn't trying, I was executing. "Sarah, we wanted to talk to you about something," my dad said about halfway through the meal. I looked up. My fork was halfway to my mouth, very still, very present. "We've been thinking about the situation," he continued carefully, "and we want to make sure we're all on the same page about how to move forward." I set my fork down. I put my hands in my lap. I looked genuinely thoughtful. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well," my mom said, "we were thinking that since this was a family matter, it would be best if we handled it as a family, without involving anyone else." The way she said anyone else was very specific. She meant lawyers. She meant the authorities. "I see," I said. "We're committed to paying you back," my dad said. "We just need time, and we think it would be better for everyone if we could work through this privately, keep it between the four of us." I understood what they were asking. They were asking me to protect my brother. They were asking me to protect themselves. They were asking me to absorb the loss and pretend it hadn't happened. "Of course," I said, "I understand." My mom looked relieved. I watched that relief cross her face, and I felt something crystallize inside me. Because what that relief meant was that she was comfortable with the idea of me being hurt as long as she didn't have to witness it actively. As long as there was no official record of it. As long as she could tell herself a story in which her family was just dealing with a difficult situation, not a mother and father who had systematically betrayed their daughter. "I appreciate you thinking about what's best," I continued. "Actually, I've been thinking about that too." I took a sip of water. "And I think what's best is that I need to understand what happened, the full scope of it, everything that was taken and when." "We have the bank statements," my dad said. "No," I said gently. "I need to understand the thinking behind it. I need Marcus to explain to me, in detail, every single time he took money from my account and what he spent it on." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Sarah, I don't think that's," my mom started. "I need this," I said. "In order to move forward and forgive, I need to understand, completely." It was a reasonable request. You couldn't argue with it. My parents exchanged a glance. "Okay," my dad said slowly. "Marcus, maybe you should sit down with Sarah and go through it." "I don't want to do it now," I said. "I want him to write it down, everything, a full accounting, and I want him to think about it carefully, because if he's lying to me or leaving anything out, I want to know that too." That was the hook, though Marcus didn't know it yet. Because once he wrote it down, once he documented the theft in his own handwriting, it would be so much more useful than bank statements. It would be an admission. And admissions are very powerful things in certain contexts. Part 4, the pressure that builds. June came and went. Marcus didn't write the accounting. He said he would. He meant to, but it required confronting something in himself that he wasn't ready to confront, which meant he just didn't do it. My parents called me every few days. Each call was softer than the last. Each call was about the payment plan. 200 a month, or maybe 300, or maybe we could do a bigger lump sum. They were negotiating with themselves while I stayed silent. I wasn't being cruel, though it probably felt that way to them. I was being precise. By July, my brother's girlfriend left him. I found out because my mom called to tell me, her voice full of that particular kind of maternal concern that's usually reserved for middle-of-the-night phone calls about car accidents. "He's going through a lot right now," she said. "I know," I replied. "Sarah, I think he really does feel terrible about what he did. He started talking about leaving the city, getting a fresh start somewhere." I understood what she was telling me. She was telling me that my brother might move away, and if he did, the problem would be solved. Out of sight, out of mind. They could pay me $200 a month and slowly we'd all forget that this had ever happened. "That sounds like a good idea for him," I said. Do you think you could maybe come to family therapy with us, just to help him understand the impact of what he's done?" I could have laughed. They wanted me to help my brother feel better about stealing from me. "I don't think I'm ready for that yet," I said. But what I was ready for was the thing I did that same week. I hired a lawyer. Her name was Jennifer Hayes. She came recommended by a friend of a friend, and her office was in a building downtown that smelled like coffee and ambition. She was maybe 50, with sharp eyes and the kind of direct manner that comes from having seen every version of human dishonesty. I told her everything. The stolen money, the forged documents, the bank statements, the fraud investigators list, the evidence folder on my computer, my parents' refusal to acknowledge the reality of what had happened. She listened without taking notes. At the end, she leaned back in her chair. "Why did you come to me?" she asked. "Because I want to know my options." "Your options are, press charges, file a civil suit, or let it go." "What happens if I press charges?" "Your brother gets arrested. There's an investigation. He could be prosecuted for fraud. He could go to prison." "For how long?" "Depends on how the prosecution goes. Could be a few months. Could be a few years." I thought about my parents' faces if that happened. I thought about my mom calling relatives to explain where Marcus was. I thought about the shame of it. "What about a civil suit?" I asked. "You sue him for the money. You'd probably win. Getting him to actually pay would be harder, but you'd have a judgment against him that would affect his ability to get loans, credit, that kind of thing." "And if I do nothing?" "You move on with your life," she said. "You take the financial loss as a tuition payment in the University of Family Trauma, and you survive." I was quiet for a long time. "I'm not going to decide today," I finally said. "I just wanted to understand what was possible." "That's smart," Jennifer said. "Give yourself time." But I didn't need time. I already knew what I was going to do. I just needed to set the stage. By August, I'd rented a small recording device. Nothing obvious, just a thin black rectangle that could fit in a pocket or a purse. I researched the laws carefully. In my state, you can record a conversation you're a part of without telling the other person. One-party consent. It was legal. I called my parents and asked if I could come home for dinner on a Saturday night, just the three of us. I said Marcus didn't need to be there. I said I wanted to talk about the money situation. They were hopeful. I could hear it in my mom's voice. Hope that maybe their daughter was going to let them off the hook. Hope that the discomfort would finally be over. I put on the dress again, the blue one. I wore the earrings. I looked like a good daughter who was trying. My dad had grilled steaks. My mom had made the potato salad I love. They'd set the table nicely. There were cloth napkins, real dishes, not the everyday ones. We sat down, and we ate for a while in comfortable silence. Then my mom said, "We're so glad you wanted to come home." "I wanted to talk about something," I said. "Something important." They both put their forks down. They were ready. They were prepared to make whatever concession would make me go back to being their daughter and not their judge. "I've been thinking about forgiveness," I said. "About what it means. About what I need in order to actually forgive." "Of course," my dad said. "Whatever you need." "I need you to understand what you did," I continued. "Not just that you took the money, but what you took when you did that, what you took from me." My mom's eyes were getting glassy. When you stole my money, I said, and I saw my dad flinch at the word stole. You didn't just take $45,000. You took my safety. You took my belief that you would protect me even when it was inconvenient. You took my trust. And then you lied to me about it. You protected Marcus instead of me. Sarah, we never meant, my mom began. I know what you meant, I said. You meant well, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I'm living in a house you built with them. I was crying now, real tears. The performance had become sincere, which made it even more effective. I don't know how to forgive that, I said. I've been trying, but I can't. We love you, my dad said. I know you do, I replied. And that's the cruelest part. If you didn't love me, this would be easier. But you love me and you still chose Marcus. You still let him hurt me. They didn't have an answer to that. I think I need to take legal action, I said quietly. The silence that followed was the silence of a world ending. Sarah, no, my mom said. Please, not Marcus. He made a mistake. He made a mistake, I agreed. And you enabled it, you protected it, you let me be the cost of his recovery. We'll pay you back, my dad said. All of it, however you want, just please don't. It's not about the money anymore, I said. And I meant it. It had stopped being about the money months ago. Part 5, the transformation into something else. After that dinner, I stopped pretending. I didn't call my parents for 2 weeks. They called me. My mom left voicemails that progressed through every stage of grief. First, she was practical. Let's sit down and talk about payment schedules. Then she was emotional. You're breaking our hearts. Then she was angry. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Then she was bargaining. What if we paid you $50,000? Would that change your mind? I listened to each one without responding. During those 2 weeks, I worked with Jennifer. We compiled the evidence. We documented the timeline. We prepared a detailed account of the fraud. We gathered photographs of everything Marcus had purchased with my money. We built a case that was airtight and devastating. I also did something else. I called my brother. Hey, he answered on the second ring. He sounded wary. I'm filing a civil suit, I said, against you for the money you stole from me. There was a long silence. Sarah, come on. Mom and Dad said. Mom and Dad don't get to make decisions for me anymore, I said. You took $45,000. You're going to pay it back, with interest, and there will be a judgment against you that will follow you for the rest of your life. I can't pay back $45,000, he said. Then you'll be sued, I replied, and you'll lose, and you'll have to deal with the consequences. I hung up before he could respond. That night, I slept better than I had in 8 months. The next morning, my dad came to my apartment. He showed up at 8 a.m. with coffee and the expression of a man who'd been awake all night. He looked smaller than I remembered, older. Can I come in? He asked. I let him in because coldness requires civility. He sat on my couch in the coffee shop smell of his own defeat. Your mother is very upset, he said. I know. This is going to destroy our family, he said. You destroyed our family when you chose Marcus, I replied. I'm just making it official. Sarah, he's your brother. He made a mistake. He made a mistake, I agreed. And you protected him. You let me suffer so that he wouldn't have to, and now you want me to suffer more by staying quiet about it. My dad's hands were shaking. If you do this, if you press charges or sue him or whatever you're planning, it will destroy him, he said. That's not my responsibility, I said. He's your brother. And I'm your daughter, but you didn't seem to remember that when it mattered. He stood up. I'll pay you back, he said. All $45,000. I'll liquidate assets. I'll take out a loan, just please don't do this. I looked at him. It's too late for that, I said. He left. He didn't finish his coffee. Jennifer filed the suit the following Monday. The lawsuit itself is a slow thing. It requires paperwork and filing and waiting periods. But the news of it travels fast, especially in a family, especially when the family is trying to keep it quiet. By By the time Marcus received the notification, everyone in our extended family knew about it. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, they all knew that I was suing my brother for stealing from me. They all knew that my parents had allowed it to happen. The family group chat exploded. My Aunt Patricia wrote, "Sarah, whatever your brother did, family doesn't sue family." My Uncle Tom wrote, "You're being vindictive and cruel." My cousin Alina wrote, "This is so sad. I hope you'll reconsider." Nobody was defending me. Nobody was saying, "Wait, she's right, they stole from her, that's actual theft." Instead, what I was getting was the kind of social pressure that families use to protect themselves at the expense of the people within them. I was being punished for making the truth visible. And you know what? That was fine. Because I wasn't doing this for their approval anymore. I was doing it for the moment when Marcus would have to sit across from a judge and admit, in front of a court, that he stole from his sister. I was doing it for the moment when my parents would have to explain themselves to a judge and understand that their role in protecting a thief had actual consequences. I was doing it for the moment when they would all understand that actions have weight, and you can't simply make people stay quiet about your crimes. That moment was coming. Part 6, the machinery of justice. Discovery is the part of a lawsuit where both sides have to show each other their evidence. This is where I became very, very useful to Jennifer. I had kept everything, every screenshot, every bank statement, every fraudulent document, every Instagram post that showed Marcus spending money he didn't have on vacations he couldn't afford. I had recorded the conversation with my parents where they admitted to knowingly allowing him to steal from me. When Jennifer presented all of this in discovery, Marcus's lawyer, a public defender named Robert Cohen, had nothing to counter it with except excuses. Marcus claimed that I had given him access to the account, that he thought I knew about the withdrawals, that he assumed my parents had explained the situation to me. All of this was easily disproven by the simple fact that I had asked the bank for documentation that I had never authorized the transactions. The bank had an investigator who could testify to that. The bank had my statement asking them to investigate the fraud. The bank had evidence that I hadn't known. Marcus's defenses crumbled almost immediately. But something else happened during discovery that I hadn't fully anticipated. My parents' emails became part of the record. And in those emails, there was evidence that my dad had confronted Marcus about the theft 2 years before they told me. 2 years. He'd known for 2 years before the bank called, and he was forced to tell me. "We can't involve Sarah in this," my mom had written. "It will only make her feel betrayed." Which is exactly what happened, except the way they'd prevented her from feeling betrayed was by actively betraying her. In another email, my dad had written to Marcus, "Your sister has her job and her apartment. She doesn't need this money the way you do right now. Let's get you stable first, and then we'll figure out how to make this right with her." They'd made a calculation. They'd decided that Marcus needed my money more than I needed my own safety. And they'd gambled on the idea that I wouldn't find out, or if I did, I wouldn't be angry enough to pursue it. They'd lost that gamble. By October, we were scheduled for mediation. This is the part where both sides try to settle without going to trial. It's more efficient. It's less painful. It's a chance to resolve things quietly. I almost didn't go. Jennifer asked if I wanted to try to settle. "What would settling look like?" I asked. "Marcus pays you back the full amount over a set time period. You drop the suit. You all agree to move forward. And if he doesn't pay, then you go to trial." I thought about this. "I want to go to trial," I said. Jennifer didn't look surprised. "I want a judge to make a ruling," I continued. "I want it in the public record. I want everyone to understand that this was theft. I want my brother to have to stand up in front of a court and admit what he did. I want my parents to have to testify about their role in protecting him." "That's a harsher path," Jennifer said. "I know," I replied. The mediation happened anyway, mostly because the court required it. It was held in a small conference room in a building downtown. My parents were there. Marcus was there. Their lawyers were there. I was there with Jennifer. For 3 hours, we went back and forth through intermediaries. Marcus would offer X amount. I would decline. My parents would offer Y amount. I would decline. We were like two people playing chess through a translator, and nobody was winning because I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to prove a point. Finally, toward the end of the afternoon, my mom asked if she could speak to me directly. The lawyers allowed it, with some hesitation. We sat across from each other in that small conference room, just the two of us. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping. Her eyes were red. Her skin had a grayish quality that suggested she'd been crying for months, which she probably had. "I know you're angry with us," she said. "I'm not angry," I replied. "I'm disappointed." "That was worse," she flinched. "We were trying to help your brother," she said. "I know. He's our son. He was suffering. And I'm your daughter. I was being robbed." She closed her eyes. "If we had known you would end up this angry." "I would have ended up angry anyway," I said. "Because you stole from me, you knew you were stealing from me, you did it anyway, and then you lied to me about it. That's not something I can forgive just because you didn't know I'd be angry. I was going to be angry. That was inevitable." She didn't say anything. "What you're really saying," I continued, "is that if you'd known the consequences of stealing from me would be this severe, you wouldn't have done it. But that's not how morality works. You don't get to say, well, I wouldn't have murdered someone if I'd known I'd go to jail. That's just the reality of the action you chose." My mom left the mediation after that. The court date for trial was set for November 15th. Part 7, The Truth That Changes Everything. Here's the thing about revenge that nobody tells you. The best kind doesn't feel like revenge. It feels like justice. By the time we got to trial, I had been planning this for 8 months. I knew every document by heart. I knew what each piece of evidence would prove. I knew what the judge would care about and what she wouldn't. The trial started on a cold morning in November. Judge Sandra Pierce was a woman in her 60s with the kind of face that suggested she'd seen every version of human dishonesty and was unimpressed by it. The courthouse was nearly empty. A few court reporters, a few observers. My parents were there. Marcus was there. My friends from work came to support me, though I'd asked them not to. I appreciated it anyway. I'd been so quiet about all of this that nobody really understood what I was going through. But seeing them there made me realize that I wasn't entirely alone. Jennifer presented the case first. She walked through the timeline methodically. She presented the bank statements. She presented the fraudulent documents. She presented the emails where my parents discussed the theft. She presented my statement to the bank about not authorizing the transactions. Then she called me to the stand. Under oath, I testified about discovering the theft. I testified about my parents' refusal to acknowledge it. I testified about the emotional impact of realizing that the people who were supposed to protect me had instead protected the person who hurt me. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth calmly and clearly, the way you'd describe what you had for breakfast. When Jennifer asked me what I wanted the court to award me, I said, "The full amount of stolen money, plus interest, plus court costs." Then the defense got to cross-examine me. Marcus's lawyer, Robert Cohen, tried to suggest that I'd given permission. I showed him the bank statement where I had requested an investigation into the fraud. He tried to suggest that I'd known about the withdrawals. I showed him the months where I'd been asking my parents about my account balance, and they'd told me it was fine. Every defense he proposed, I had documentation to disprove it. After an hour, he gave up. Then Jennifer called my parents to the stand. My dad testified first. He admitted that he'd known about the theft for 2 years before telling me. He admitted that they'd allowed the withdrawals to continue. He admitted that they'd discussed it as a family and decided not to tell me. When Jennifer asked him why, he said, "We didn't want her to feel betrayed." There's a moment in a trial where everyone in the room understands that one side has completely lost. This was that moment. My mom testified after. She was crying before she even sat down. She confirmed everything my dad said. She admitted that they'd prioritized Marcus's comfort over my safety. Then Jennifer asked the question that broke her completely. "Did you love your daughter?" Jennifer asked. "Of course we did," my mom said. "Did you love your son?" "Of course. But you chose to protect your son's crime instead of your daughter's safety." My mom didn't answer. She couldn't. The trial lasted 2 days. Judge Pierce's ruling came 3 weeks later. She awarded me the full $45,000, plus interest, plus court costs, totaling $52,000. She found that Marcus had committed fraud. She found that my parents had knowingly allowed the fraud to continue. She placed a judgment against Marcus that would follow him for 7 years. The ruling was public record. Anyone could look it up. Anyone could see what Marcus had done. Anyone could see what my parents had allowed. My brother in front of that courtroom had to stand up and admit that he stole from his sister. My parents had to stand up and admit that they enabled it. And me, I sat there calmly while it all unfolded, because I'd known exactly what was going to happen, and I'd planned for it down to the last detail. Part 8, the aftermath of understanding. The ruling changed things. Within a week, Marcus moved out of the city. I don't know where he went. California, I think. Somewhere far enough away that he didn't have to see the people he'd hurt or deal with the reality of the judgment against him. My parents had to start making payments. The court required it, $500 a month for the next 104 months. That's almost 9 years of monthly reminders that they stole from their daughter. But something else happened that I didn't expect. My mom called me 3 weeks after the ruling. I almost didn't answer, but I did because I wanted to hear what she had to say. "I've been in therapy," she said. I didn't respond. "The therapist helped me understand something," she continued, "about why we did what we did, about why we chose Marcus instead of you." "Okay," I said. "We were afraid," she said. "We were afraid that if we held him accountable, he would hate us. We were afraid that if we told you, you would think we were bad parents. We were afraid of so many things that we ended up creating the exact situation we were afraid of." I listened. "I know this doesn't fix anything," she said. "I know you're not ready to forgive us. Maybe you'll never be ready, but I wanted you to understand that we're aware of what we did now. We're living with it. Every month we make that payment, and every month we remember that we betrayed our daughter." It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was an acknowledgement. It was the beginning of understanding. "I didn't do this for your redemption," I said. "I know," she replied. "I did it because I needed you to understand what you did." "I understand now," she said. I hung up after that. My dad never called, not then and not in the months that followed. I think the shame was just too large for him. He made the payments, but he did it quietly. He did it like a penance. He did it like a man who understood that he'd lost something he couldn't get back. Which he had. Part 9, the quiet after. By January, the initial storm had passed. My parents' marriage survived, though they were quieter with each other. My extended family had mostly stopped commenting on the lawsuit. The community had moved on to new drama, new scandals, new failures to gossip about. I went back to being just another person at the coffee shop, just another person at the gym, just another person at work, doing my job, living my life, building something. The money from the judgment was deposited into my bank account. I transferred it to a new investment account, the same amount my brother had stolen, as if putting it back into the universe would somehow balance the scales. It didn't balance the scales, nothing would, but it made me feel better. What surprised me most was how little satisfaction revenge actually gave me. I'd been expecting to feel triumphant. I'd been expecting to feel validated. I'd been expecting to feel like I'd won something major, like I'd crossed a finish line. Instead, what I felt was tired. Because the truth is that revenge is just another kind of grief. It's another way of staying attached to the people who hurt you. It's another way of organizing your life around their betrayal. And once I won, I had to figure out how to stop doing that. I stopped checking my parents' social media. I stopped monitoring Marcus's activity. I stopped thinking about them constantly, measuring every interaction against the betrayal, testing every conversation for sincerity. I started building something new. I moved to a better apartment. I got the promotion I'd turned down before. I started dating someone who didn't know my family, which meant I could just be myself without having to perform anything. And one day, about 6 months after the trial, I realized that I'd gone an entire week without thinking about any of it. That's when I understood what the real victory was. It wasn't that I'd won the lawsuit. It wasn't that I'd made my parents understand what they'd done. It wasn't even that I'd protected myself legally and financially, though all of those things mattered. The real victory was that I'd stopped needing them to acknowledge the hurt in order to move forward. I'd gotten the court to do it instead. Part 10, the ending that isn't really an ending. It's been a year now. I haven't spoken to my parents in 4 months, not because I'm angry, but because I'm at peace. And peace, I learned, sometimes requires distance. Marcus moved to Los Angeles. He's working as a personal trainer at a gym in Santa Monica. I know this because my mom mentioned it in a text. He's paying his judgment, slowly. $500 a month. It will take him 9 years to pay off what he stole in 7. There's a certain poetry in that. My brother and I are not in contact. I don't know if we ever will be. He had the chance to take responsibility on his own, and he didn't. So now he gets to live with the consequence of someone else taking responsibility for him. He gets to exist under the public record of his own theft. He gets to live with the weight of what he did. I don't think about him much anymore. My parents, though, I think about differently now, not with anger, but with something like pity, because they got exactly what they were afraid of. They were afraid that holding Marcus accountable would make him hate them. Instead, they enabled him to become someone hateable. They were afraid that I would think they were bad parents. Instead, they proved it to a judge. They're different now, quieter, more careful. They ask before they make decisions instead of assuming. They think about consequences. I think, in a way, the lawsuit did its job. It wasn't my job to fix them, though. It wasn't my job to heal them or help them grow. It was my job to protect myself, and I did. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd just let it go. If I'd taken the $200 a month and moved on with my life. I think about the version of me that exists in that timeline, quietly hurting, quietly betrayed, quietly accepting that her family didn't think she was worth protecting. That version of me is sadder. But that version of me also didn't have to go to trial. She didn't have to sit in a courtroom and watch her mother cry. She didn't have to see her father's face when his actions were laid bare in front of a judge. She didn't have to spend a year planning and executing a revenge that ultimately didn't make her feel better. She just moved on. I'm not sure which version had the better life. What I do know is that I'm not that version. I'm the version that said no. I'm the version that demanded accountability. I'm the version that understood that sometimes the only way to protect yourself from people who love you is to make them understand, bone deep, what they've done. I'm sitting in my apartment now, in the evening light, and I'm thinking about what I would tell my 17-year-old self if I could go back. That girl who opened the letter about her account balance and felt the world tilt. I would tell her that the betrayal was real, that it mattered, that she was right to be angry and right to do something about it. But I would also tell her that revenge, true revenge, doesn't fix anything. It just turns you into a different kind of person. It makes you colder. It makes you more strategic. It makes you someone who thinks in terms of leverage and evidence and judgment instead of in terms of love and forgiveness and family. I would tell her that there's a cost to victory, and sometimes it's worth paying, and sometimes it's not. But I would also tell her that she was strong enough to survive it, that she was smart enough to win, that she was brave enough to demand that the people who loved her understand what they'd done. And that sometimes, that's enough. The sun is setting outside my window. The light is golden and soft. It's the kind of light that makes you want to believe in new beginnings, in the possibility that time heals all wounds, in the idea that people can change. I'm still waiting to see if that's true. But I'm not holding my breath. What I am doing is moving forward. What I am doing is building something better. What I am doing is existing in a world where my betrayal has consequences, where my hurt was acknowledged, where the people who wronged me understand, at least a little bit, what they did. That might not be revenge, but it's close enough. And for now, it's enough for me.